Ashwing and the Girl of Elderglen. Chapter 1. The Valley of Secrets. The Valley of Elderglen lay cradled between mountains that reached into the clouds like the ribs of the world. In summer, the meadows swayed with wildflowers, and the river sang as it threaded its way through rocks polished smooth by time. Sheep grazed on the hillsides, and smoke curled gently from chimneys of the scattered cottages. It was a peaceful place, at least, that was what the grown-ups said. But Liora, who was only 12 years old, thought Elderglen was too peaceful. "Nothing ever happens here," she sighed one morning, tossing a pebble into the river. She had chores, of course, fetching water, sweeping floors, helping her mother with the garden, but her mind was always wandering beyond the valley's edges. "Liora," her father called from the field, "keep your eyes on the sheep, not on the clouds." "Yes, Papa," she replied dutifully, but as soon as his back was turned, her gaze drifted upward again. She longed for adventure, for mystery, for something hidden that no one else had seen. The old folk often told stories to keep children cautious, of wolves in the forest, spirits in the mist, and long ago, dragons. But everyone knew those were just tales. Dragons had vanished from the world before even her grandmother's grandmother had been born. Or so they said. One day, while chasing the faint echo of a bird's call deeper into the woods than she should have dared, Liora found herself standing before a cliff draped with thick curtains of ivy. She tilted her head. Behind the green veil, she noticed a dark slit in the rock, an opening, almost like a door. Her heart thudded with both fear and excitement. Most children would have turned back. Liora, however, whispered to herself, "At last, a secret." She pushed the ivy aside and stepped into cool darkness. The air smelled of ash, faint and ancient. Deeper inside, she saw faint glimmers on the walls, like sparks caught in stone. The cave wasn't empty, it breathed. A low, rumbling sound filled the cavern. Not the wind. Not water. A sound alive. Two golden eyes opened in the dark. Liora froze. Her breath caught. The stories had been true after all. A dragon lay curled in the shadows, scales burnished copper, wings folded like sails. Smoke curled from his nostrils. He was massive, terrifying, magnificent. Her knees trembled, but instead of running, she whispered, "Hello." The dragon blinked, surprised. For centuries, humans had only screamed or raised weapons. Never had one greeted him. His voice was deep, like thunder rolling over the mountains. "Hello, little one." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss more eerie and fascinating tales. Chapter 2. The Cave of Ash and Ivy. Liora's heart hammered so loudly she was sure the dragon could hear it. The golden eyes watched her without blinking, their glow reflecting against the cave walls like lantern light. She clutched her hands together to stop them from shaking. "Don't run. Don't run. If he wanted to eat me, he already would have." The dragon lifted his great head, the movement stirring the air into a warm gust that smelled of smoke and earth. "You are not afraid," he rumbled. "Of course I'm afraid," Liora admitted, her voice small but steady. "But, not so afraid that I can't say hello." For a long moment, the cavern was silent except for the soft crackle of smoke. Then the dragon huffed, releasing a stream of warm breath that ruffled her hair. Strange child. Most would scream and flee. Liora tilted her chin. Most don't look for secrets. A deep sound rumbled through the dragon's chest. At first she thought it was a growl, but no. It was a laugh, rough and rusty, as though he hadn't used it in centuries. "What do they call you, little seeker of secrets?" he asked. "My name is Liora." The dragon's eyes softened. "Liora," he repeated, tasting the syllables like an old memory. "And I am Ashwing." The name seemed to hang in the air, ancient and powerful. Liora had heard it before, in whispered tales by the hearth. Ashwing, the flame of the mountain. The last terror. But looking at him now, curled in his lonely cavern, she saw not terror but weariness. "You're real," she whispered. "I thought dragons were only stories." Ashwing's gaze turned inward, heavy with sorrow. "Stories. Yes. That is all we have become. Shadows in children's songs. Once we filled the skies, and the world trembled at our passing. Now, only I remain." Lyra's chest tightened. She thought of her own loneliness, the way other children laughed at her wandering daydreams, the way adults scolded her for asking too many questions. Somehow, in that moment, she understood him. She took a careful step closer. If you're the last, then you shouldn't be alone. I could, she hesitated, but the words tumbled out anyway. I could be your friend. Ashwing blinked, stunned. Friend. It was a word he had not heard in 100 lifetimes. Why? He asked, his voice softer now, almost fragile. Lyra smiled, though her knees were still shaking. Because secrets shouldn't be lonely. For the first time in centuries, the great dragon lowered his head to the ground, so his eyes met hers at the same level. Then, Liora of Elderglen, he said slowly, you are welcome in my cave. And so began a friendship no one in the valley could have imagined. Chapter 3. Blackberries and Stories. The next morning, Liora could think of nothing but the cavern. She moved through her chores in a daze, spilling half the water she carried from the river, forgetting to salt the stew, and nearly dropping a basket of eggs. Liora, her mother sighed, your head is always in the clouds. But her heart was in the mountain. By midday, she had gathered a small basket of blackberries from the thickets near the forest edge. Their dark juice stained her fingers purple. She rinsed them carefully in the stream, then tucked the basket under her arm. That afternoon, when no one was looking, she slipped back to the ivy curtain and ducked inside. The cavern seemed less frightening this time. She no longer felt like an intruder, but like someone entering a friend's home. Ashwing, she called softly. The dragon's golden eyes opened in the shadows. A curl of smoke drifted from his nostrils as he stirred. You return, he said, his voice still rumbling like distant thunder. I brought you something. Lyra held up the basket, the berries glistening in the dim light. I wasn't sure what dragons eat. Ashwing tilted his great head. Cattle, once. Deer, sometimes. But no one has offered me fruit before. He lowered his snout to sniff the basket. With delicate care, surprisingly delicate for something so large, he plucked up a cluster of berries with the tip of his tongue. His eyes widened. Sweet, he murmured, almost in wonder. I had forgotten the taste of sweetness. Lyra grinned. Then I'll bring more. She sat cross-legged on the stone floor, and for the first time, the cave did not feel like a place of shadows but a room filled with warmth. They spoke, first in careful steps, then more freely. Lyra told him about her village, how the shepherds whistled to their flocks, how the children played games by the river, how the baker's oven filled the air with bread each morning. Ashwing listened intently, his great eyes soft. In return, he told her stories older than any book, of when dragons soared in flocks across the skies, their wings blotting out the sun, of the endless wars with kings who sought to slay them, of the songs dragons sang to the stars. Lyra hugged her knees to her chest, listening with shining eyes. You mean, she said breathlessly, the stars really listen? They do, Ashwing said. But only to those who dare to sing. Her heart swelled with wonder. Never had anyone spoken to her this way, not as if she were a child to be hushed, but as someone worth sharing secrets with. When at last she rose to leave, Ashwing's voice stopped her. Why do you come here, little one? Do you not fear what your people would say if they knew? Lyra hesitated at the ivy curtain. Because, she said softly, I think you're lonelier than I am. And maybe we don't have to be. The dragon's eyes glowed like twin suns in the dark, and for the first time in many long years, Ashwing felt something stir within his chest that was not fire or sorrow. It was hope. Chapter 4. Whispers of Fire. The days slipped into weeks, and Lyra's secret visits to the cavern became the brightest part of her life. Whenever she could, she brought Ashwing little offerings, berries, sketches she had drawn, even a loaf of bread once, though he laughed and said he would need a mountain of loaves to feel full. In return, he told her more of his memories. Battles won and lost, skies once filled with the thunder of dragon wings. Yet he spoke also of gentler things, how fire could warm, not just destroy, how dragons once sang at dawn to wake the mountains themselves. But secrets have a way of leaving traces. One evening, as Lyra returned home, she heard her neighbors muttering near the well. Did you hear it last night? One woman whispered. A sound like thunder, But the sky was clear, said another. And smoke. My boy swears he saw smoke curling from the high ridge this morning. Lyra's heart clenched. They had heard Ashwing's restless sighs, perhaps even caught the scent of his smoky breath drifting down the valley. By the next day, the whispers had spread. Shepherds claimed their flocks grew uneasy at dusk. Children dared each other to run toward the mountain's edge and listen for roars. Some villagers shook their heads, saying it was only wind or foxes in the hills, but others grew uneasy. Lyra kept her head down, but her mind whirled. If they find him, what will they do? That night, she crept back to the cavern. Ashwing was waiting, his eyes glowing like coals in the dark. "You're troubled," he said. She nodded, twisting her fingers together. "People are talking. They've noticed. They say there's something strange in the mountains." Ashwing lowered his head, smoke drifting from his nostrils. "They always notice, eventually." His voice was heavy with old weariness. "What will they do if they discover you?" Lyra asked, though she already knew. The old stories always ended with swords and fire. The dragon was silent a long time before answering. "What they have always done. Fear what they do not understand." Lyra's throat tightened. She thought of the villagers sharpening knives for the autumn harvest, of the hunters who boasted of wolves they had slain. Against them, Ashwing was vast and powerful, but also alone. She reached out and touched the rough scales of his foreleg, warm beneath her hand. "Then I'll keep your secret," she whispered fiercely. "No one needs to know but me." Ashwing's great golden eyes softened, though sorrow lingered in their depths. "You are brave, little one. Braver than most I have ever known." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the sound of distant voices from the valley below. Lyra pressed her palm against the dragon's scales and silently promised herself, "I won't let them take you. I won't." But in Elderglen, whispers were already hardening into fear. Chapter 5: The First Flight. The next time Lyra crept through the ivy curtain, she found Ashwing pacing restlessly inside the cavern. His claws scraped against stone, his wings shifting with an itch that no stillness could cure. "You're troubled too," Lyra said gently. Ashwing lifted his head. "The walls close in on me. I have stayed hidden so long that I have almost forgotten the sky." His voice dropped, thick with longing. "And yet, the sky was once mine." Lyra's heart stirred. She had often dreamed of flying, climbing trees just a glimpse farther, tilting her face upward when birds wheeled overhead. "Then go," she urged. "Stretch your wings." Ashwing's eyes glowed faintly. "And if I am seen?" She hesitated, then smiled a little. "Then let me see instead. I won't tell anyone." The dragon studied her, as if weighing a choice older than the mountains. Finally, he lowered his head beside her. "Climb on." Lyra blinked. "Climb, what?" "You wish to see the world as I do. Then climb onto my back." Her knees nearly gave way from excitement and fear. She had ridden ponies before, but this was no pony. This was a mountain with wings. Still, she scrambled up carefully, gripping the ridges of his scales until she settled between his great shoulders. "Hold fast," Ashwing rumbled. With a single mighty stride, he surged forward, and then his wings unfurled. The cavern filled with a rush of air as vast as a storm. One powerful beat lifted them from the ground, and before Lyra could catch her breath, they shot through the ivy curtain into the open night. The wind roared past her ears, cold and wild, but her heart sang louder. Below her, the valley lay silvered in moonlight, the river winding like a ribbon through the dark fields. Beyond stretched mountains upon mountains, their peaks crowned with stars. Lyra gasped. "It's beautiful." Ashwing's chest rumbled with something between laughter and relief. "Yes," he said, his voice lifted by the wind. "It is." Higher they climbed, until the cottages below were no more than firefly sparks. Lyra spread her arms wide, feeling as though she too had wings. All her life, she had been told to keep her feet on the ground, to mind her chores, to stay safe. But here, in the sky, she felt more alive than ever before. Ashwing banked gently, circling the peaks, and for the first time in centuries, the joy of flight returned to him, not the hunted fleeing into clouds, but the free soaring of his youth. For a while, there was no fear, no whispering villagers, no loneliness, only the dragon and the girl, rising together into the endless night. When at last he landed again at the cave mouth, Liora slid down from his back, her legs trembling but her eyes shining. That was... she couldn't even find the word. That was everything. Ashwing bowed his great head, golden eyes gleaming softly. Then perhaps, he said, you were meant for the sky as much as I. And in that moment, the bond between them deepened into something unbreakable. Chapter 6. Shadows of Fear. By the time summer's warmth began to fade into the gold of autumn, the whispers in Elderglen had hardened into unease. Shepherds swore their flocks startled at unseen shadows overhead. Children claimed they had heard a roar in the night. Smoke had been sighted rising from the mountain slopes more than once. Around the well, in the tavern, at the blacksmith's forge, the talk was always the same. There's something up there. Too big for a wolf, too fierce for a bear. My grandfather said the mountains once belonged to a dragon. Nonsense. Dragons are only stories. Stories don't shake the ground when they breathe. Liora kept her face carefully still whenever she overheard. But inside, worry gnawed at her like a hungry fox. One evening, carrying water from the river, she paused when she heard the hunters gathered near the inn. Their voices carried through the twilight. Can't ignore it any longer. If it is what we fear, better to strike first. We'll climb the ridge before the harvest moon. Her hands trembled, and the water sloshed over her skirt. They're coming for him. That night, she raced up the mountain path to the ivy curtain. Ashwing greeted her with a low rumble, but his eyes sharpened as soon as he saw her face. You bring heavy news, he said. They know, she blurted. They've heard you, seen smoke. The hunters are preparing to come after you. Ashwing did not roar or rage. Instead, he closed his eyes and lowered his massive head to the stone floor. As they always have. Humans cannot let dragons live. No. Lyra's voice cracked with desperation. She rushed forward, placing her small hand against the warm scales of his muzzle. Not you. Not now. You haven't harmed anyone. His great eye opened, watching her with a depth that made her feel both tiny and immense at once. The world fears what it does not understand, little one. Perhaps it is wiser to flee before their spears arrive. Lyra's throat tightened. She imagined him vanishing into the mountains forever, alone again, the sky his only companion. The thought ached worse than fear. You shouldn't have to run, she whispered fiercely. Not anymore. I'll find a way, I promise. They'll see you as I do. Ashwing gave a sound like a sigh, smoke drifting from his nostrils. You dream of impossible things, child. Maybe, she said, straightening, her eyes bright with determination. But someone has to. For the first time, Ashwing did not answer. His gaze lingered on her, caught between disbelief and the faintest flicker of hope. Outside, the wind carried the faint clang of blacksmith sharpening blades. The shadows of fear were lengthening, and soon they would reach the cave. Chapter 7. The Hunter's March. The harvest moon rose round and full, casting silver light over Elderglen. That was the night the hunters chose. They gathered at the village edge with torches in hand, spears gleaming sharp in the firelight. Their faces were set, grim but resolute. Fear had hardened into purpose. Liora stood in the shadows, heart pounding. She had known this moment would come, but dread still wrapped around her like iron chains. The hunter's leader, a broad-shouldered man named Gerrick, raised his voice. Whatever haunts our mountains will not be allowed to threaten our valley. Tonight, we put an end to it. The villagers who watched murmured in uneasy agreement. Mothers clutched their children closer. Old men shook their heads, muttering about ancient times returning. Lyra's hands clenched into fists. They don't understand. They don't know him. When the hunters began their climb toward the ridge, she slipped away from the crowd and ran, faster than she ever had before. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but fear for Ashwing drove her onward. She reached the ivy curtain long before the hunters, stumbling into the cavern breathless. Ashwing, she gasped. The dragon lifted his head, eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. They are coming. His voice was quiet, heavy with the certainty of old wounds reopening. You have to hide. Liora pleaded. Please, fly far away. Don't let them find you. But Ashwing shook his massive head, smoke curling around his jaws. No more running. I am weary of hiding like a thief. If they wish to face me, then so be it. Tears pricked Lyora's eyes. But they'll kill you. The dragon lowered his head until his golden eye was level with hers. Or I will frighten them into leaving. Either way, my fate has waited long enough. Liora pressed her palm against his scales, her voice trembling but fierce. Then I'll stand with you. Ashwing's gaze softened, though sorrow lingered. Little one, their spears are not meant for children. I don't care, she said. They'll listen if I speak. They have to. For a long moment, dragon and girl stared at one another, the weight of the night pressing down. Then Ashwing gave the faintest nod, as though conceding a battle he had never expected to lose. Outside, the glow of torches flickered up the mountain path. The hunters' voices carried closer, their steps heavy on the stones. Liora wiped her eyes and turned toward the cavern mouth. Her heart raced, but her feet held steady. When the hunters broke through the ivy, spears raised, they found not only a dragon waiting, massive, copper-scaled, golden-eyed, but a small girl standing in front of him, her arms spread wide. And her voice, clear and strong, rang out into the night. Stop. He is not your enemy. He is my friend. Chapter 8. The Girl Who Stood Tall. The hunters froze, startled by the girl who dared stand before a dragon. Torches flickered in the night wind, casting long, quivering shadows across the rocky mountainside. Garrick, the leader, stepped forward, his spear lowering slightly, but only a little. Child, he said, voice sharp, step aside. This creature is dangerous. Move, or I won't move. Lyra's voice rang louder than she had imagined possible. He hasn't harmed anyone. He's not your enemy. A murmur ran through the hunters. Some exchanged uneasy glances. Others tightened their grip on their spears. Ashwing shifted behind her, a low rumble vibrating through the stones. Smoke drifted lazily from his nostrils, but his posture was calm, almost regal, as if he were protecting his small companion. Liora swallowed the fear twisting in her stomach and stepped forward another foot. Look at him, she shouted. Do you see him? He's not a monster. He's kind, and he's lonely, just like us. The hunters hesitated, torn between centuries of fear and the undeniable truth in the girl's words. Some of the villagers who had followed whispered, She's right, he hasn't hurt anyone. Garrick's jaw tightened. He was a man shaped by years of tales warning that dragons devour all in their path. Yet when he glanced at Ashwing, massive though he was, he saw no fire poised to strike, only golden eyes watching, alert but not cruel. Speak then, Garrick said cautiously. Why should we believe a child over our own eyes and ears? Liora took a deep breath. Because what you fear is not always what is true. He can be our friend if we let him. He can protect the valley, if you only give him a chance. Please, don't kill him. A hush fell over the mountainside. Even the wind seemed to pause. Ashwing, sensing the weight of her words, lowered his head slightly, a gesture of trust, of surrender, if necessary, toward the humans. The movement was subtle, yet it carried a message clearer than any roar. Garrick's grip on his spear loosened. He studied the dragon, then the girl, then the valley stretched below. In that moment, the legends of fear clashed with the reality before him, a dragon who could have destroyed them all and yet did nothing. Finally, he stepped back. Perhaps, we have been wrong, he muttered, lowering his spear completely. The other hunters exchanged uncertain glances, then slowly followed their leader's example. Torches wavered in the night, but no blades rose. Liora exhaled, trembling from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. You see, she whispered to Ashwing. You're safe. For now. The dragon lowered his head to her shoulder, and the warmth of his scales pressed against her. You are braver than the bravest knight I have known, he murmured. Liora hugged him tightly. And you're the kindest dragon I've ever met, she said. Above them, the stars gleamed, indifferent to human fear and dragon power alike, yet somehow bearing witness to a friendship that had survived its first trial. Chapter 9. The Pact of the Mountain. The following days were unlike anything Elderglen had ever seen. News of the girl who had stood before a dragon spread quickly, carried by whispers, awe, and reluctant admiration. The hunters returned to their village, but their spears were empty. Garrick himself spoke to the Council of Elders, recounting what he had seen, a dragon, massive and terrifying, yet gentle. "He does not seek to harm us," he said. "And the girl, she has shown courage none of us could claim." Some villagers were skeptical, others curious, but a cautious hope took root. Liora visited Ashwing each morning, bringing sketches, food, and small gifts she had collected. The dragon's mood shifted with the changing light, his fire now calm, his laughter rolling like distant thunder. One crisp morning, perched on the cave's edge, Ashwing spread his wings and looked down at the valley. "Little one," he said, "I have lived long, seen empires rise and fall. I never thought I would find a place where humans and dragons could coexist. Yet, your bravery has made it possible." Lyra's eyes shone. "We can help each other. If we trust, they can learn too." Ashwing dipped his head, allowing her to climb onto his back. "Then let us show them what friendship looks like." That day, they soared above Elderglen, wings cutting through the sky like golden lightning. Villagers stared, mouths open, as the great dragon circled above, a girl riding proudly on his back. Some fled in fear, but others, especially the children, cheered and waved. When Ashwing landed near the edge of the village, Garrick and a small group of elders approached. Lyra stepped forward beside him, unafraid. "He is yours to judge," she said simply. "But see him with your own eyes. See that he is not your enemy." Ashwing lowered his massive head in a slow, deliberate bow, a gesture of respect and trust. The elders murmured among themselves. Slowly, one stepped forward. "Perhaps we have been too quick to fear. Perhaps this dragon can live among us, if we honor him." The first tentative step toward peace was taken that day. Ashwing still roamed the mountains, but he was no longer alone. Lyra's bravery and belief had built a bridge between two worlds long divided by fear. That night, as stars glittered over Elderglen, Ashwing lowered himself beside Lyra in the cavern. "Your courage has given me something I thought lost forever," he said softly. "And your friendship has given me the sky," she replied, resting her head against his warm scales. In the quiet of the mountain, they dreamed together, humans and dragons not enemies, but friends learning to share the world. The valley slept below, peaceful for the first time in generations, and the bond between a dragon and a girl grew stronger than any fear. Chapter 10. Flight into Forever. Autumn gave way to winter, frosting the mountain peaks with silver and gold. Elderglen had grown accustomed to the dragon in the skies above, and children no longer feared the shadows that passed over their cottages. Instead, they ran into the fields, hoping to catch a glimpse of Ashwing's shimmering wings. Lyra stood at the cave mouth, her breath visible in the crisp air, her heart beating with excitement and longing. Ashwing lowered his massive head, golden eyes gleaming. "Little one," he rumbled softly, "we have changed the world around us. But the sky is still ours to explore." Lyra smiled, climbing onto his back with ease. "Then let's go," she said. "Let's see everything we've only dreamed of." With a mighty beat of wings, they lifted off the mountain. The wind rushed past, carrying away the last traces of fear and doubt. Below, Elderglen shrank into a patchwork of fields and forests, peaceful and small, but part of a larger world they had yet to explore. They flew over rivers that gleamed like silver ribbons, over forests deep and endless, and mountains crowned with snow and starlight. Lyra laughed, the sound mingling with the dragon's rumbling joy, and for the first time, she felt truly boundless. "This is everything," she whispered, leaning against the scales that were warmer than any hearth. "Yes," Ashwing agreed. "And it is only the beginning. Wherever we go, we carry courage and trust with us. That is stronger than fear, and braver than any sword." The stars above seemed to shimmer brighter that night, as if cheering them on. And as they soared higher, the mountains and the valley below fading into the distance, Lyra realized something profound. Friendship could be as vast as the sky, and as eternal as the wind. Together, dragon and girl flew into forever, free from fear, free from loneliness, free to explore a world where hope and courage had forged a bond stronger than any legend. And the sky belonged to them alone.